All right, hello everyone. Today we're going to be starting a new series called What If, and we're going to be talking about Liverpool today. So we have our two expert pundits, Simon and Lucas, and also Idris, who's here joining us today. Um, so for the first What If of this series, we're going to be talking about Liverpool, and more specifically, Gerrard's slip in the 2013-14 season that in some ways made Liverpool lose the league. So first I'm going to give a bit of context before the Gerrard slip, how the Gerrard slip happened and the consequences of the Gerrard slip. So a bit of context, 2013-14 season, Liverpool probably have one of their best teams in recent times. You had Brendan Rodgers as manager. You had Sterling, Suarez, and Sturridge up front, who were lighting up the league really. And then Liverpool were unbeaten since was it January or February, something like that, and they were sort of running away with it. Before the Chelsea game, they had a 5-point lead on Chelsea and a 6-point lead on Manchester City, with Manchester City having 2 games to play. So going into this game, Liverpool have a very offensive playing style, which kind of characterized their whole season. And Chelsea just had Mourinho, and Mourinho going into this game was going to have a very Mourinho-esque game, opting to park the bus for the whole game and play counter-attack, as Chelsea often do, well, under Mourinho. So the game, first half, not much is going to happen. Chelsea are going to be laying back as usual. Liverpool are going to try to attack. And it's near the end of the first half, 47th minute, where they're going to pass the ball to Gerrard. He's going to miscontrol it, slip, and Demba Ba is going to run to goal and score. Rest of the second half, Chelsea are going to play 7-8 at back. Liverpool aren't going to be able to take him down, and Willian scores a goal in the 90th minute to make it 2-0. Now, following this, Manchester City win the 2 games they had, go level on points with Liverpool, and Liverpool then famously bottle it at Crystal Palace, where they tie 3-3 and consequently lose the championship. So, of course, it's pretty funny now looking back to Liverpool, who are going to probably win the league in the following weeks, and when they probably should have won the league 6 years ago now. So we're going to be looking at what if Gerrard never slipped, and maybe the whole Chelsea-Liverpool game would have changed. If Liverpool drew or won, maybe they would have never bottled it at Crystal Palace, and City would have never won the league. So now we're going to see what happened. What happened after that game? First of all, the consequences. City won the league. Brendan Rodgers stayed, but the whole team psychologically still weren't there. And they had a dreadful 2014-15 season. Klopp came into the club, and now Liverpool are what we know them as today. So what we're going to do now is see what could have happened if Gerrard didn't slip. So if anyone wants to start, go ahead. Yeah, Simon, go on.
Well, just looking at the game itself, so Liverpool were coming in having just beaten Man City 3-2 the week before. It was a big performance. They'd gone up 2-0 in the first half, and then Man City came back, scored 2 in the 60th, around in the 60s of minutes, and they still managed to find a winning goal with Coutinho. So they really shown that they were a team that could win the title the week before. And there he was in the middle, Steven Gerrard, the captain, at that time in his late 30s. He'd been playing his whole career with Liverpool, and that was the one thing missing, was that title. So you really expected it wasn't going to be from Gerrard. The mistake wasn't going to be from Gerrard. And coming into the game against Chelsea, all they need to do is win their games to win the league. And yeah, that happened.
Yeah, only 3 games left. And
yeah, still haunting every Liverpool fan to this day. And I mean, looking at the game stats afterwards, see, what is it? Liverpool had 26 shots during the game, more than 70% possession. It completely dominated the whole game. But Chelsea played with pretty much a back six during the whole game and just parked the bus as Mourinho does. And yeah, I mean, that mistake haunted us clearly during the game against Crystal Palace when we went up 3-0. You could see the players, we had to actually get goal difference. We had to actually get a better goal difference to beat Manchester City. So even at 3-0, players were still taking the ball out of the net and hurrying up. And clearly that made us lose our focus. And that's why we ended up bottling it against Crystal Palace. So, yeah, I mean, it was a really disappointing way to end the season. I mean, even though Brendan Rodgers was saying that the result was honorable, I mean, it had been 24 years since our last title, and really nothing but the title would have mattered. But in the long term, it's interesting to see that, Brendan Rodgers was fired a year or so later in 2015. And it's pretty clear to see that if Gerrard hadn't slipped and Liverpool had won the title, then it's very unlikely that Brendan Rodgers would have been fired the next year, which would mean that Klopp would probably not have made it to Liverpool. And potentially, I don't know, he could have gone to a club like Arsenal, which would have made the Premier League landscape very different at this point.
I mean, yeah, of course, Idris, it must make you wonder that maybe Gerrard slipping kind of, in a way, making Arsenal, regret everything.
Well, yeah, maybe, but I think not only for Arsenal. I think, well, obviously, him slipping caused this big chain of events. Obviously, if Brendan Rodgers won the league, he would have stayed. Klopp wouldn't have come, which means we wouldn't have had the team today, but most importantly, we wouldn't have had the good football we see today. And I think last year and this year, Liverpool are kind of implementing themselves as like a football powerhouse in the league. I think they still have a good run, maybe the chance to win titles, maybe 2 or 3 years in a row for upcoming years. So I think in the long run, it might have actually benefited Liverpool, the Gerrard slip, because they get to extend this sort of good performance. While if Liverpool had won that year, it might have been just a one-time thing. But even though it might have felt bad for Liverpool fans at the time, I think now we can really appreciate the real Liverpool and what it brings to football. And I think that's what you look at. You have to look on the bright side.
Yeah, for sure. You have to look on long term, but still thinking about it. Do you think, Lucas, that maybe you have the thrill of winning a title? Maybe they would have made incredible signings into summer. Being really optimistic for the next season. Maybe they would have carried on.
Well, winning a title doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do well next season, no matter how good your mentality turns out to be. I mean, you can look at Leicester the year after they won the title, and they ended up having to fire Ranieri, who had just won them the year before, having accomplished what no one really thought was possible. I mean, with 3,000 to 1 odds, etc. Yes, it would make a difference in mentality, positive attitude towards the next season. But I'm not sure.
And I think it's a shame just for loads of players' careers, because you see Brendan Rodgers, and if you give Brendan Rodgers a Premier League title in 13-14, probably never would have gone to Celtic. We never have seen the Leicester that we have today either. And I think there's an important debate to have over Gerrard's legacy, because you give Gerrard a title, Premier League title, 13-14, in the way they win it, we'd probably be talking differently about Gerrard. A lot of us, there's the whole Lampard-Gerrard debate where, I mean, depends the way you look at it, but Lampard could be a better player than Gerrard. You can put him over. And I think if Gerrard did win that title, there wouldn't been any debate. I think his status of best English midfielder ever would have probably been up there.
I think it's also interesting to go back to Idris's point about Liverpool in the long run, because if you look at the team that Liverpool actually had in 2013-14, other than the front three, which were quite amazing, the rest of the team was not that remarkable. I mean, if you look at the defense, for example, that they fielded against Man City that season, I think the defense was made out of Mamadou Sakho, John Flanagan, Martin Skrtel. He may have been on the bench, but it really wasn't a Champions League winning defense by any means. I mean, the best player there would have been Martin Skrtel, who consistently scores like 10 to 15 own goals a season, which is fairly unfortunate. And I mean, the fullbacks, particularly that season, were very poor. And I mean, even if you look at it after the season, I doubt that had they won the Premier League, they would have made really much better signings than they made. And I mean, all they got really to replace what they had. I mean, defense, I think they may have signed Alberto Moreno and Javier Manquillo.
Yeah.
I think they also signed Dejan Lovren, which was in the long term a pretty good signing, seeing as he was really the main the other center back with Van Dijk when they won the Champions League. But
yeah, but see, you that front three is still so important. Sterling and Suarez, if they stay at Liverpool for another year, who knows? Probably they would have created another dynasty, I think. Because the way
by then Suarez, I think Suarez had already decided he was leaving. So he was never going to stay. And Sterling had already voiced discontent with being in Liverpool. He wanted to leave to Manchester City. Because, I mean, I don't think he saw a Champions League to win in Liverpool, which is ironic now. And yeah. We're happy that he hasn't won one at Man City. But yeah, I think in the long run, the whole rebuild was definitely much better for Liverpool in terms of winning a Champions League. But then winning a title less than 30 years after winning the last one would have been much nicer. And plus, this whole title isn't really as legitimate with the whole coronavirus thing, which sucks.
You haven't won it yet either. You could still, bottle it another.
That's true.
Oh yeah, it's pretty funny. You got a midweek game against Crystal Palace on Wednesday.
Yeah,
It could be.
Let's not do that again, please.
I'm just saying, just putting it out there, just in case anything happens.
This time though, at Crystal Palace could be the time they actually win it. If Manchester City doesn't come up with a win at Burnley.
Yeah.
Still pretty unlikely, but yeah, I really want to focus back on Gerrard's legacy. I think it's an important point because next season goes on, last chance at a title, and then he leaves Liverpool kind of not ugly fashion, but it's not great. So I think. In your top 10 midfielders, where do you put Gerrard with a title? Because he would have won everything in English football plus a Champions League. Surely it's got to put him up there.
All time?
All time, though.
God, who do you put? Give Gerrard a Premier League title. Who you putting above him? Zidane, obviously.
Zidane, Cruyff.
Iniesta, probably, yeah.
Iniesta, Xavi.
Yeah, maybe.
Schweinsteiger?
Yeah.
He was not better.
You can't. No, I think we're undermining the Premier League too much. Because you look at the great Premier League midfielders.
De Bruyne.
Milner, yeah. But I mean, Lampard, is Gerrard even a better player than Lampard?
Yeah.
If you give him a Premier League title.
I think
he's a better player than Lampard anyway, to be honest.
Yeah, but I think you also have
player generally.
So
yeah, Gerrard might be a better player than Lampard, but what you have to think about is the effect he leaves on people and on the public and the fans. I think Lampard he left Chelsea as a hero, and now he's come back as a coach, and he's fighting for a top 3 position. Gerrard, instead of leaving as a hero, maybe the year where they could have won the title, he ended up being leaving with like a man with regrets and kind of like leaving as a meme. And I think that really impacted his image. I think that's why people maybe not consider him as being one of the best. But play-wise, I think he was up there.
Yeah, I think in a way you can kind of compare it to Zidane leaving his France international career with the headbutt on Materazzi,
I
and
agree.
Gerrard, well, not his last game, of course, but sort of leaving the last Liverpool image is him slipping up and Demba scoring. Right.
But also, let's not forget his actual last game really wasn't better because
Oh,
it was
yeah.
a 6-1 defeat to Stoke, which was incredibly painful. I mean, at least they essentially just let him score
Yeah.
at the end, but it was very painful. It's just unfortunate that people will remember those, but won't remember, for example, like the 2005 Champions League final, where he was really the main catalyst in getting Liverpool back into the game and in allowing us to win, along with Jersey Dudek, of course. But yeah, it's sort of like Zidane, who had his great 1998 final, which really was his crowning moment. But unfortunately, the career didn't end there, and had to end with really a few terrible moments.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but you know, as we said, in the long term, Liverpool benefited it. Now, Manchester City, I think, probably as well wouldn't be the club they are today without this Premier League win, because in a way, I think Manchester City. I don't know how many Premier League titles they've won last decade, but probably 3, 4. But I think for them, you know, sort of creating that animosity with Liverpool, it sort of created a big rivalry when you look at across the decade, with Man United dropping off and Liverpool being the new sort of replacement, I guess. But I think City wouldn't be the club they are today without Liverpool fucking up in the way they did. You know, you don't give enough credit to Manchester City for all the titles they've won in these circumstances.
Yeah, I think that so that title loss for Liverpool was kind of the beginning of their downfall, and it also started a new transition period in Man City, because after this, that's when they started buying Sterling, and so I think that was the start of their rebuild. And I think you know how they say one man's trash, another man's treasure, and I think well, Sterling. I'm not saying Sterling was trash. I'm just saying he was the image of one team's downfall, led to another team inspiring to go to higher lengths. And I think Liverpool's downfall was the start of Man City's rebuild. And now the tables have kind of turned and leveled up a bit.
How was I going to say? Yeah, so if we push the whole story to the side, as Simon was saying, so if Klopp doesn't go to Liverpool, where does he go? Because it was going to be his last season in Dortmund anyway, because of how it was going in 15-16. So, I mean, we'll have to talk about Arsenal. Arsenal, Klopp, you put Klopp in Arsenal in 2015-16. Do Arsenal become the Liverpool we know today?
Well, you have to think about the signings they'd make. I mean, part of the reason that Liverpool made such great signings over the last couple of years was because of Klopp's influence. I mean, he was really mostly responsible for a lot of these signings, like Mo Salah, for example, or Fabinho, or a lot of these, or Virgil van Dijk and Alisson. I mean, he was the one who was able to spot the talent. And when you look at Arsenal over the last decade, that's been the main problem. It's been recruitment. It's been the fact that pretty much everybody they've brought in has flopped, except for maybe Ozil a couple seasons and Sanchez a couple seasons. But there's just not been a solid, really playing level amongst the players. And additionally, I think it's also the culture that Klopp has created. I mean, when when even when Brendan Rodgers was there, and generally in the early part of the decade, Liverpool were really similar to Arsenal. I mean, they were a very good team. They played good football, but they were soft, and you couldn't count on them for a big win, which is really like what Arsenal is now. And you could see that when Klopp arrived, they instantly became more solid. And I mean, it did take a little bit of time. I mean, you still have these little terrible losses, like the one against Watford this season, but you could see that all of these bad aspects about the club were rooted out when Klopp arrived, and you could only imagine what would have happened if he'd gone to Arsenal instead.
Yeah, well, I don't remember this, but when did Aubameyang sign for Arsenal? It,
17?
I think
yeah,
it
it was
was
later on, much later on.
I think it was summer 2017
no, I think it was 2018.
or 2018 maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, for the signings, I think you give Klopp that team, Arsenal team, he would have made it better, even without the signings on a go. I think Arsenal right now, we'd be talking about them for the title if Klopp came nearly instantly.
I think Klopp would have made greater use of the young players from the Arsenal academy. When I think of Willock, I think of Reece Nelson.
Yeah.
I think he would have put I think he would have put those players to better use sooner, instead of relying from the older players at first, and then the younger players after. He would have started with the younger players. He would have had maybe a year or two of transition, but then once the younger players would have fitted in, I think we'd have a top Arsenal team right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you saw what he did with Trent Alexander-Arnold, for example, who was a center mid his whole life in the academies, and he brought him up and essentially turned him into a fullback. And I mean, the quality that he's shown since he's arrived is, I mean, off the charts. And you could see the same talent in a lot of these young Arsenal players. I mean, Willock or Maitland-Niles. I mean, they're excellent players, but there's just been something about Arsenal managers that they always want to use, I mean, their new signings, even if they don't really perform that well. I mean, against Brighton, for example, one of the best players was Saka, who, I mean, he had that one excellent shot at the start of the game, but yeah, they just haven't been phased in properly into the team. And also, you've got to think that the defense would be much more solid with proper leadership from the manager. I mean, that's been the problem. Is I don't know if it's the way that they've been trained or something, but it's just mistakes every week, and they're just not solid at the back. Whereas with a good manager, you know that can be shored up.
No, I agree. I think also what Klopp puts into the team, maybe not, I wouldn't go that far as to say a zero tolerance policy, but I think he's harsh. He does accept mistakes, but I think he quickly understands that if mistakes are too recurring, and then it's just not meant for the team, the player is just not meant to fit in. Well, I think at Arsenal, they've been trying to give too many second chances. I think players like Ozil should have been gone at least last year, or should have been gone a long time ago.
Yeah,
and I think it's just the hold of just holding on to players. I think that's just slowing down the team.
Definitely, yeah. Ozil's contract is absolutely absurd. I think I mean, no European team in their right mind that can actually afford him is going to take him on. So you've got loads of players locked down that just have absurd payrolls. So I don't know. Maybe Klopp could have turned Ozil over, kept Sanchez. Yeah, it definitely could have been an exciting prospect. And you kind of hope for Arsenal to find a new Klopp. Maybe that's Arteta, but who knows?
Well, the main issue with Ozil was that he's the type of player who needs some sort of a supporting cast around him, because he's a playmaker. He, on the pitch, what he does is assist other people. He doesn't
He's
really
not a Gerrard,
do
yeah.
himself. So, I mean, when you were leaving him essentially for 3 years, well, for his first year, he had pretty much nobody. He had Welbeck. And then he had, I mean, he had Sanchez, which I guess worked a little, but he really never had the supporting cast. Like, for example, at Real Madrid, he was a different player when he had excellent. I mean, he had excellent quality around him that he could actually assist and provide for. He was a different player. It's just tough for a player like that to fit in a team that really doesn't have the talent that he needs. And yeah, I mean that was the problem with Arsenal for a while is they went for a couple of these big signings, but never really had a solid crew around them. And that's what Liverpool did with Klopp that was excellent. I mean, even as a Liverpool fan, until very recently, I thought that there were big holes in the team. I mean, I really didn't think that Henderson would be the player that he is right now until very recently. It's just that as a collective, Klopp has been able to make the players play together very well, even in the places where there were holes. They really were filled really through teamwork, which at Arsenal was definitely not the case.
Yeah, and actually, I think we could be talking differently about every Arsenal player if Klopp went there. As his career wouldn't be the same. No one's career in that club would have been the same. And I think it's a shame because, a shame. We're seeing loads of really talented players go through a club where it feels like they'll never reach their full potential. So, I mean, I guess we can kind of be annoyed at Gerrard for that, saying that, Arsenal could have been great, but in some ways, in a ripple effect, it was his fault that they weren't as good. See, another excuse for Arsenal fans, Idris. Isn't that great?
But we also we have no guarantee, to be honest, that Brendan Rodgers wouldn't have been sacked. He could still have been sacked. Like,
he could have been, but I mean, even then, it did sometimes feel like it was a little early for him to be sacked. So I really doubt that. I mean, I'm sure he would have been given the benefit of the doubt had he won a title, because it's always much harder to fire somebody who's gotten you a title, unless you're Abramovich, who just fires whoever the hell he wants. You usually don't want to fire somebody who's given your club a title, especially if it's the first one in 24 years. I mean, who's to say it won't happen?
It would have been pretty strong. Yeah, you can look at it loads of ways, really. But if anyone has any ending arguments to add, what if Gerrard didn't slip? Go ahead. But otherwise, apart from that, I think we'll end it here. So that was that was the first ever episode of the What If. What?
Yeah, if there's one thing that came out of the Gerrard slip, I guess we could say is that we wouldn't have Arsenal Fan TV today.
Yeah. We wouldn't have all
for the good of football, Gerrard slipped, and he gave us Troops and Robbie and DT.
And he gave us loads of good memes. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
The Gerrard slipping memes are,
Unfortunately.
You know they're going to be on the thumbnail. They just have to.
Yeah.
But yeah, apart from that, that was the first episode of this What If series. Comment below if you liked it. Don't forget to drop a like. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Thank you, guys.